Good day, everyone. Your discussant at the moment, Kailasha Juneda Cardell, and we are the Group 1. We will discuss the Nobel Prize and one of the award-winning piece entitled Boys and Girls by Alice Munro, Nobel Prize for Literature. To discuss the origin and background of Nobel Prize, let us know first who is Alfred Nobel and what is his connection to the Nobel Prize. Of course, obviously, there is a connection between Alfred Nobel and Nobel Prize because he is the founder of the Nobel Prize and that's why it is named after him. Now let's talk more about his life and how this entity was established. Alfred Nobel is third of the 8 children of Henriette Ashtel and Immanuel Nobel, a Swedish engineer, architect, inventor, and industrialist. Nobel is born in Stockholm, Sweden at October 21, 1833. Aside from being the founder of Nobel Prize, he is also a scientist, inventor, and businessman. He loves literature and writing poetry at a young age. However, his parents were opposed to it, that's why he is not published anything. His father appointed tutor, he loves language, and became fluent in English, German, French, and Russian. He studied chemistry under Nikolai Zenin. He went to Paris in 1850 and US at the age of 18 to further his knowledge. His inventions are 355 in all, and the most famous is dynamite. He has one element in periodic table called nobelium named after him. He may be wealthy, but he has not married or had any children. Alfred died at the age of 63 in San Remo, Italy, dated December 10, 1896, due to intracerebral hemorrhage. Moving on, let's now further his invention, especially to explosive, to enlighten how was Nobel Prize was established. After graduating, Alfred Nobel works on his father's factory, but when his father's business faltered after the end of the Crimean War, Nobel returned to Sweden and set up a laboratory to experiment with nitroglycerin since Alfred was into studying explosive. In 1863, he invented a way to control detonation of nitroglycerin, a highly volatile liquid that are too dangerous to use. 2 years later, Nobel invented the blasting cup, an improved detonator which starts the modern use of high explosives, which surpassed the most dependable explosive, black powder. In 1864, Nobel's nitroglycerin factory blew up, killing his younger brother and several other people, which shows that nitroglycerin remained dangerous. Searching for safer explosive, in 1867, Nobel produced a kieselguhr, a combination of nitroglycerin and a porous substance that is highly explosive mixture that was much safer to handle and use. Wherein Nobel named his invention dynamite from the Greek word dynamis meaning power. Securing the patents on dynamite, Nobel acquired a fortune as humanity put his invention to use in construction and warfare. In 1875, Nobel created a powerful form of dynamite, blasting gelatin, and in 1887, introduced the ballistite, a smokeless nitroglycerin powder. Around this time, there was an explosion which killed his brother Ludwig in Cannes in 1888. His brother's death was mistook as his. Therefore, the news was published in a newspaper. The news from a French newspaper wrongly obituary Alfred's Nobel death, stating that the merchant of death was dead. During this time, Alfred Nobel seemingly regrets his invention because other people view him as a merchant of death. Upset with the situation, he realized that this was how he will be remembered once he is dead. Due to his eagerness to do something to redeem his reputation, he left a major portion of his wealth from his 355 invention for the creation of the International Prize Fund for honoring eminent persons in the field of physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and for work and peace. With this, inventors like him can be remembered and known by their contribution to mankind. This changes Nobel's will at his last year. He signed it at Swedish Norwegian Club in Paris on November 27, 1895. owing to skepticism surrounding the will. It was not approved by the Storting in Norway until April 26, 1897. The executor of the will is Ragnar Solhaman and Rudolf de Quist, formed the Nobel Foundation to take care of the fortune and organize the awarding of prizes. Ball's instruction named a Norwegian Nobel Committee to award the Peace Prize, the members of whom were appointed shortly after the will was approved in April 1897. Soon thereafter, the other prize awarding organization was designated. Nobel Foundation was founded as a private organization on June 29 in 1900. Its function is to manage and finance the administration of the Nobel Prizes. Robert and Ludwig Nobel were involved in the oil business in Azerbaijan, and according to a Swedish historian E. Bergengreen, who accessed the Nobel family archive, it was this decision to allow the withdrawal of Alfred's money from Baku that became the decisive factor that enabled the Nobel Prize to be established. This foundation is not involved in the process of selecting the Nobel laureates. In many ways, the Nobel Foundation is similar to an investment company. This invests to enable the Nobel money to create a solid funding base for the prizes and administrative activities. Now that we know the origin of the Nobel Prize, thus moving on its background, let's start by defining the Nobel Prize. Nobel Prize is an annual award for outstanding intellectual achievement conferred upon the top minds of 6 fields such as physics, chemistry, physiology, and medicine, promotion of peace and science and economic, which was later added. This prize was given on the 10th of December, yearly during the death anniversary of Alfred Nobel, honoring him. His will creates number of problems and openness of many questions left unanswered by him. Therefore, it took 5 years for the first set of Nobel Prize to be given away in 1901, and this is when economic science was added, honoring Alfred Nobel. The Peace Prize has the inscription for peace and brotherhood of men, while other prizes have invention, enhanced life, which is beautiful through art that more than 3 could share with. Individual or pairs of 2 or 3 winners of Nobel Prize are called Nobel laureates. Usually, in September, the year before the prize are awarded, the nomination forms are sent to prominent academics, about 3,000, where it was returned January 31, the year of the awarding. While inquiries to Peace Prize are sent to the government and former laureates and members of the Norwegian Nobel Committee. Nobel Committee nominates about 300 potential laureates from these forms and additional names. The nominees are not publicly named nor they are told about it. All nomination records for a prize are sealed for 50 years from the awarding of the prize. The Nobel Committee prepares reflecting reports about the advice of experts in the relevant field along with the list of preliminary candidates is submitted to the prize awarding institution. The institution chooses the laureates in each field by a majority of votes, whereas the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences decides the prize for physics, chemistry, and economic science, while the Swedish Royal Caroline Medico-Surgical Institute determines the physiology or medicine award. And the Swedish Academy chooses the literature, and a committee elected by the Norwegian Parliament awards the Peace Prize. The decision cannot be appealed and is announced immediately after the vote. A maximum of 3 laureates and 2 different works may be selected per award, except for the Peace Prize, which can be awarded to institutions. The award can only be given to individuals, wherein the prizes are all given in Stockholm and presented by the King of Sweden, except Peace Prize, since it is given in Oslo, Norway by the King of Norway. Prizes includes the sum of money in a form of document confirming amount depends on how much the Nobel Foundation can award each year. Divided by, if there are 2 laureates, it is equally shared, and there is 3, it depends on the award committee. The diploma contains a picture in the text in Swedish, which states that the name of laureate and the normal citation why they received the prize. Well, Nobel Peace Prize laureates has ever had a citation, and the 18-karat gold medal that bears the face of the prize namesake and the founder of the prize. For physics, chemistry, and physiology or medicine and literature, have identical of verses showing the image of Alfred Nobel of the years of his birth and death. Noble's portrait always appears on obverse of the Peace Prize and Economics Prize, but with a slightly different design. For instance, for the laureate's name, it's engraved on the rim and economic medal. For additional information, the Nobel Prizes beginning in 1901 and the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science beginning in 1969 have been awarded 603 times to 962 people and 25 organizations. 4 individuals have received more than one Nobel Prize as of December 11, 2020. US ranked first having 290 laureates in total. There are no awards given posthumous unless the person dies after the award is announced. Let me end my part with Alfred's quotation that if I have thousands of ideas and only one turns out to be good, I am satisfied. With this lesson of the origin and background of the Nobel Prize, we can conclude why Nobel says this quote as his numerous inventions, only Nobel Prize live up his reputation. Thank you everyone. Now it's time for the next discussion by Ms. Polvorosa.
Literary standard of Nobel Prize. Artistry. This is a quality that appeals to our aesthetic sensibilities. Alice Munro has created its style pattern for the short narrative, which harkened back to its beginning in oral storytelling or women's storytelling, emphasizing how it avoids more usual generic tropes description. Intellectual value. It broadens our mental horizon by revealing essential truths about life and human nature. The fundamental issues in Alice Munro's short story, A Boys and Girls, is complying with and opposing society's gender norms. Firstly, Munro displays society's weak and stereotypical view of women through the protagonist's mother. The mother acts exactly as society expects girls to: stay inside the house, cooking and cleaning. For example, the mother did not come out of the house unless it was to do something, hang out the wash, or dig potatoes in the garden. Boys and girls is set during a time when there is no such thing as gender equality. Men are the dominant, authoritarian heads of the household in this society, and their job is done outside the home. Women are expected to care for their husband and complete their work at home. Suggestiveness. Literature's emotional impact. Great literature has a profound effect on us, stirring our emotion and imagination, providing and generating visions that are above and beyond the common level of life and experience. The narrator of the short story, Boys and Girls, tell herself stories. The narrator's world is combined with illusions about opportunities not available in that world in this story. She saves people from a burning building, shoots rabid wolves, and gallops through the town on horseback. Spiritual value. It elevates the spirit by bringing our moral principles into life, allowing us to become better people. The short story tells us that even if you want something, it could not turn out to be as fantastic as you imagine. As they become older, most kids have to deal with gender identity issues. Permanence. It can be read again and again as each reading gives fresh and new insights. In the story, as a newborn, you are assigned a gender and you will be raised as that gender until you decide to break the norms and change the roles. Once children learn they do not have to comply with the rules, they develop feelings of love, confidence, and understanding for themselves and others. The issue of gender is an anchor in Alice Munro's Boys and Girls, giving the story a deeper significance and providing the reader with insight into stereotyping and gender assignment among children. Universality. Great literature is timeless and relevant at the same time because it deals with the sentiments and truths, and it is timely and appealing to everyone. In Alice Munro's story, Boys and Girls, the main character needs to learn about the harness of the world not through the deaths of farm animals, but from the expectations of her gender and the roles she will be forced to play later in life, even if she does not want to, which is very relevant to the present. Style. A writer's unique perspective on life, how she formulates her ideas, and how she conveys them. Alice Munro used the short story genre to explore issues of identity related to gender and nationality. Alice Munro expresses her ideas through the short story Boys and Girls. She eloquently attests to how women worked during this century to significantly transform the social standing.
So I will be discussing the life of Alice Munro, who wrote Boys and Girls. Alice Ann Munro. Alice Ann Munro was the one who wrote Boys and Girls. She was born on July 10, 1931 in Wingham, Ontario, Canada. Alice Munro is so attached to his regional county that even her work such as in Boys and Girls can be seen this attachment. Her father is Eric Laidlaw, a mink and a fox farmer that resembles to Munro's story in Boys and Girls, wherein the narrator's father in the story is a fox farmer too. On the one hand, her mother, Anne Clark Laidlaw, was a school teacher. When she was 12 years old, she knew to herself that what she wanted to be, and this is to be a writer. In fact, Alice Munro was appalled by the ending of Andersen's Little Mermaid when she was a child. Therefore, she rewrote the ending of it and make it untragic because for her, Little Mermaid deserves a happy ending. And this is how Alice Munro started writing. Alice Munro's husband was James Munro, and they have 4 children. In Victoria, the two, James and Alice, established a bookstore. But before that, Alice Munro worked as a library clerk, waitress, and tobacco picker while she was studying English and journalism in 1950 at University of Western Ontario. In 1951, she left the university and married James Munro, her fellow student. Alice Munro is now 90 years old. In her early age, she became fond of reading. In Ontario, where she lives, Alice Munro said that women there are into reading and into staying at home, where she did also, while men are opposite to women's activities. Here, we can reflect Alice Munro's county in Ontario from her work titled Boys and Girls because this story shows differences of men and women roles in the society wherein men are superior while women are inferior and men have more essential purpose in the society that leads to gender inequality in the story. To Alice Munro, as a woman, it never bothers herself being in this situation. She wrote Dance of the Happy Shades, Too Much Happiness, Boys and Girls, and many more. It was said that Dance of the Happy Shades is where boys and girls taken. Dance of the Happy Shades was Munro's first collection of short stories that represents forbidden freedom of women that somehow connected to the discussion of boys and girls. The story, The Dance of the Happy Shades, won Governor General's Award for English Fiction. Aside from this award, she also received Nobel Prize in Literature, International Booker Prize, and many more. Indeed, she is one of the Canada's top author and her masterpieces reached around the globe. In fact, her works were translated into 14 languages. She was also the first Canadian and 13th woman who received an award for Nobel Prize in Literature and known as one of the greatest contemporary writers of fiction. Alice Munro made stories all the time, and during her long walk to school, she created stories that sensationalizes the character about her as a hero. When she built her own family, her time in writing became difficult because of her responsibility as a mother. And before her victorious moment, Alice Munro also experienced rejections from publishers, and at some point of her life, she felt that her stories are not excellent and that she needs to learn a lot from writing. When Alice Munro got a copy of her book from her publisher, she hid this book so she would not have to look to the books she wrote. Maybe because she did this because of her doubts in her writing skills. However, one day she took it and read it and thought that it is not as bad as Alice thought. What I amazed on this event is that the book that Alice thought is bad won Governor General's Literary Award in 1968, and this book was The Dance Happy of the Shades. In this section, I will discuss the time and milieu when Alice Munro is writing the text Boys and Girls. The short story Boys and Girls was written by Alice Munro. It was published in 1968 in the Moonshiller. The story was narrated by a young girl in the story, thus this is in a first person point of view. The short story of Alice Ann Munro, The Boys and Girls, captures her native place in Ontario regarding its society and culture milieu about the rule of men and women there. The narrator in the story lives in the mid of 20th century wherein gender inequality is a dominant discussion and situation in the society. Not only that, the story shows differences of being a girl and a boy, which obviously embarks in the title that allow us to have a hint and to foreshadow what will be the story will tell us.
Good day everyone, I am Mark Owen Mongon and I am assigned to discuss the elements of fiction found in Boys and Girls by Alice Munro. So this will be the content of my presentation. First, let's start with the setting. The setting is on the family's farmland located outside of a small town named Jubilee. The events that transpired in the story mainly happens in the barn or sometimes in their family's house. The next element are the characters. The first is the narrator, who is the girl, is the main protagonist of the story who narrates the whole story from her point of view. As the story progresses, the narrator slowly realizes the differences between girls and boys. The next character is Laird, who is the narrator's younger brother. At first, Laird is seen as a helpless boy who is of no real use at the farm. But as the story progresses, the narrator becomes painfully aware that Laird will one day take her place at the farm and she will be stuck inside the house doing girls' chores. The next character is the father, who is a fox farmer who sells fox fur. He is a decent and hardworking man, and he shares the same thoughts as his wife that their daughter will eventually stop helping him and instead help her mother instead. The next character is the mother, who does chores inside the house but works just as hard as the men outside. It is revealed in the story that the mother would talk animatedly with her daughter as they work together inside the house. Like her husband, she also can't wait for her daughter to help her full-time in order to lessen her burdens. The last character is Henry Bailey, who is a farmhand and is already basically part of the narrator's family. Henry Bailey is very friendly towards the children, and he is pretty much the source of entertainment in the barn. The next element would be the plot, but it will be discussed by Miss Desiree Mayor.
Hello everyone, this is Desiree Mayor to discuss about the plot of the short story entitled Boys and Girls by Alice Munro. But before that, allow me to give a brief recap what the plot is. So a plot is one of the elements of a short story. It basically narrates the sequence of events happened in a short story. It consists of different parts, which are the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and of course, the resolution. So in the story of Boys and Girls, we have identified two kinds of plot, which are the main plot, which revolves around the family, and the subplot, which is about the animals, specifically the two horses in the farmyard. So the scope of my report will be about the main plot, and it will be Mr. Lester Chua who will discuss to you the subplot of the story. So let us begin with the exposition. The narrator, which is the 11 years old girl, introduced us to her family and each one's role in their house. She first described her father as a fox farmer who raised silver foxes and later on killed and skinned them when their fur was primed to solve their pelts into a company. She then goes describing her mother, which according to the narrator, her mother stayed at her house most of the time doing the housework. The operation of killing and skinning of these foxes was held on the cellar of their house, and the narrator and her brother Laird often watched their father and the hired man Henry Bailey as they do their job. The mother of the narrator, on the other hand, disgusted the whole pelting operation as the odor penetrated in the whole area. So at night, after the narrator and Laird were sent to bed, the narrator described how they were afraid of nights in the room upstairs. For her, the cellar of their house, where the odor of the foxes can be smelled and Henry's laugh resonates, remind her of the warm and safe place than being in their bedroom. Her brother Laird often sang songs to sleep, such as Jingle Bells, while the narrator read a book, and when Laird fell asleep, it was the perfect time for her to tell the story she keeps telling herself every night. In this, she would fall into another world wherein the main character was herself. The scenario is whether about saving people from a bomb building, shooting two rabid wolves, or riding a horse across the street of Juville as people acknowledging her for her heroic deeds. So let us now move on to the rising action of the story. Indeed, both Laird and the narrator preferred the outside work than helping their mother with the housework. Although the narrator mentioned that her father won't talk to her unless it is about her job, completely opposite to her mother who would willingly tell her everything. Nevertheless, the narrator chooses to help her father still with a feeling of pride. One time, she saw her mother and father having a conversation down at the barn. Her mother was complaining as if having no girl because the narrator will take every chance she would get to escape the housework. She then overheard her mother says, "Wait till Laird gets a little bigger, then you'll get a real help." She was offended by her mother's remarks and thought that her mother cannot be trusted. The narrator hated being confined in hot and dark kitchen during summer, but she knows it was what her mother wanted to keep her out from her father's business. At this rate, we can picture out the narrator as what we call tomboy, as she preferred working under the water than being in their house. But then, she began noticing stereotypical of being a girl in terms of strength, behavior, emotions, and etc. It was one time when the narrator and her brother Laird went fighting, and it turned out hurting her, even though she uses her whole strength towards her brother. It was also one time when her grandmother came to visit. She was often told how a girl must behave, such as no girls slam doors, neither girls keep their knees when they seated. And when she asked some random question, she will be told that it was no girl's business. The climax of the story, when Mac, one of the two horses that they took in during winter, will be shot to kill as it fell ill. The narrator and Laird sneak in to watch how they shoot Mac, and her legs becomes a little shaky after they witness how Mac died while Laird wasn't affected at all. 2 weeks later, the narrator knew that it was Flora's turn to be killed, but this time, the narrator didn't think of watching how they shoot her because she thought it was something to see only once. This is also when the narrator began being conscious of her physical appearance and her studies. Going back, while the narrator and Laird were out in the yard to pick branches of tree, they heard their father's voice and Henry's shout. Flora escaped and headed straight towards the gate. Her father shouted at them to shut the gate, so she ran as fast as she could, but instead of shutting the gate, she opened it wide and let Flora flee. At this point will be the following action and resolution of the story. The narrator went home while Laird go with their father and Henry Bailey to catch Flora. The narrator was contemplating how she changed these past few days. The narrator also mentioned how she has been trying to decorate her part of the room to make it fancy. And what's more interesting is when the story she keeps telling herself at night changes. From being a savior, a protector, or a hero, it turns into a same scenario. But this time, she was the one being saved, whether by a boy from her class or her teacher named Mr. Campbell. Early in the morning, when the father, Henry Bailey, and Laird went home, clothes were stained by blood, which only meant that they had captured and killed Flora. The family and Henry Bailey were in the dining table, and it was when Laird exposed what the narrator did to help Flora escape. The narrator was asked of the reason why she let Flora flee, but she just cried and unable to answer. The father then dismissed the revelation and says she's only a girl. At this time, the narrator didn't protest because she thought maybe it was the truth. There goes the main plot of the story. Now allow me to give a brief discussion about the subplot since it was only the side story of the whole story. However, this will infuse important information about the main storyline, so it is also relevant to understand the subplot of the story. So the family of the narrator took in 2 horses during winter named Mac and Flora. Mac was an all-black working horse, while Flora was a sorrel mare and a driver. The narrator described Mac as a slow and easy to handle, while Flora was a violent and fast driver. Yet, the life of Mac didn't take long as his teeth became in bad shape, which according to Henry Bailey, when a horse teeth was gone, he's gone. Henry led Mac at the barn as the father of the narrator carried his gun. And after a moment, Mac swayed, kicked his leg on the air because of the unbearable pain, and a little later, she collapsed and sank. It will be skinned and cut into pieces, according to the narrator. And then 2 weeks later, it was Flora's turn to be killed. Flora escaped from the stable and ran around the barnyard freely. The narrator's father and Henry Bailey ran after her, but Flora went straight towards the open gate, and the narrator let her free, and it never slowed down while heading towards the township road. But unfortunately, it was revealed that Flora was captured and faced the same end of Mac. That's all, thank you. Hello again, this is Desiree Mayor, and this time I will discuss about the conflict of the short story. So the story of Alice Munro's Boys and Girls depicts 2 kinds of conflict, which are the man versus society and man versus himself. The conflict man versus society can also be considered as the external conflict wherein the conflict arose between the coming of age of the protagonist that is slowly becoming aware of the traditional gender role and the expectation of the people around her. The short story Boys and Girls of Munro had this traditional stereotype which expect women to stay at the house and do the housework and how a woman must behave. Furthermore, from the very beginning, we've learned that the mother of the protagonist was forcing her to stay at the house by giving her something to do. Thus, the protagonist's idea of becoming a great value in her father's work was torn when she soon realizes this expectation from the society. Another conflict arose is the man versus himself, wherein the protagonist was struggling to find her own identity. It was mentioned that the protagonist find enjoyment or give importance to her father's work more than her mother. But later on, we've learned that the protagonist was having a change of heart as she became interested of decorating her room, wearing fine dresses, or the way she think. Thus, there is the conflict of man versus himself as the main character battled with her own thoughts. That's all, thank you.
Hello again, I am back to present the remaining elements of fiction. Let's start with the point of view. It is in the first person point of view as narrated by the 11-year-old girl. This is only just a speculation of mine, but this is so that we can somehow relate to the narrator, be able to experience the inequalities she had felt. Next is the tone. It is the bitter tone at the conclusion. This makes the readers believe that although the narrator was somewhat defeated at the conclusion, take note that the story is in past tense, so it is only a retelling of the past, but in the present time, she continues to fight the patriarchal society. The overall mood of the story are sad, bitter, and defeated. We can see this at the end when all the narrator could do was cry and be labeled as just a girl. The next is the symbolism. The first is the songs that the narrator and her little brother sang. The song symbolizes the maturity. In the story, the siblings would sing before they go to bed. Laird would sing Jingle Bells whether or not it was Christmas. This symbolizes his own immaturity, whereas the narrator would sing Danny Boy, which symbolizes her own kind of maturity. But as they grow older, they stop singing altogether. This also symbolizes their maturity and growing out of their own childishness. Next are the fox's pens and the horse's stables, which symbolizes being raised in a controlled environment. You could say that the narrator was also in this kind of situation because she is only expected to help in the barn for a certain time frame, and once she reaches her prime, she will then be assigned to housework for the most part of her life. So in short, she never actually had the freedom to choose for herself. Next is the grandmother, which is the personification of society's stereotypes. We can see in the story that when their grandmother visited, she kept on imposing certain actions targeted to girls, like girls don't slam doors, they keep their knees down when sitting, and worse was when she answered, "That's none of girls' business." We can definitely see how society has stereotyped girls. Next is the kitchen, which symbolizes like a pen or a prison. The narrator wasn't actually very fond of kitchen work. To her, it felt like working there was endless, dreary, and depressing. She far preferred to work outside where it was more important. Next is Mac, which symbolizes the acceptance of reality. In the story, Mac didn't actually try to resist his fate and just accepted the fact that it was time for him to be shot. And lastly is Flora, which signifies the defiance and freedom, much like the narrator. Flora was very different from Mac. She actually tried to run away from her fate. In a sense, she was like the narrator. They both wanted freedom, but no matter how much they ran away, they still ended up being defeated by a much more powerful force. And lastly, is the themes, gender identity. At first, the narrator thought nothing much about the word girl, but she slowly realizes that her being a girl is the reason for her inability to choose for herself. And next is gender inequality. We've seen how girls are stereotyped as people who are nothing but houseworkers, and are expected to act feminine in order to suit the society's stereotypes as mentioned by her grandmother. It is also revealed it is also revealed that girls were typically not allowed to work that to do work that are exclusively for men, which is the reason why she could no longer work in the farm because her brother Laird will soon take her place. The final nail in the coffin was when her father labeled her as just a girl, which pretty much shows the patriarchal society at that time. That ends my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Does Alice Munro deserve the Nobel Prize for Literature? The Nobel Prize in Literature is a Swedish literature prize that was established by Alfred Nobel in 1895. It was awarded annually to an author from any country who has, in the words of the will, in the field of literature, produced the most outstanding work in an idealistic direction. This award was based on author's body of work as a whole. Alice Munro, the renowned Canadian, cited as the master of contemporary short story, whose works explore the tangled relationship between men and women, small-town existence, and the fallibility of memory, deserves the Nobel Prize for Literature. She has been a constant advocate for the power of short story. She said the significance of her win is not for herself, but for her art form. She hopes that people will see short story as an important art. According to Peter England, the permanent secretary of the Swedish Academy, Munro is capable of a fantastic portrayal of human beings. She has done a marvelous job, and what she has done is quite enough to win the Nobel Prize. The Nobel Committee noted that her texts often feature depictions of everyday but decisive events, epiphanies of a kind that illuminate the surrounding story, and lets existential questions appear in a flash of lightning. Munro's work was noted for its precise imagery and narrative style, which is at once lyrical, compelling, economical, and intense, revealing the depth and complexities in the emotional lives of everyday people. Munro's story gives so much life within the bounds of a single take that nourishes almost as much as a novel. She fills her stories, which are often no longer 20 to 30 pages, with more life than many 700-page works. In a really short space of time, she can provide a fully realized story that provides remarkable insight into human beings, their shortcomings, their loves, their lives. She gained international recognition with her exquisitely drawn narratives. Her writing has brought her several awards. She won the Commonwealth Writers' Prize, the National Book Critics Circle Prize for Hateship, Friendship, Courtship, Loveship, Marriage, and is a three-time winner of the General's Prize. She is a writer who masters her craft with virtuosity and whose writing serves as a model for many other authors, with good reason. She has been repeatedly called a writer's writer because she is widely beloved for her spirit and psychologically astute fiction that is revealing of human nature, appeared to be more purely literary choice. She revolutionized the architecture of short stories and brought a modesty and subtle wit to her work. She deserved the Nobel Literature's biggest prize for writing about the richly complicated lives of ordinary people, and women specifically honors not only Munro, but the value of those lives too.
Again, this is the Group 1, and this is where our discussion about the Nobel Prize for Literature, which won by Alice Munro's short story entitled Boys and Girls ends. Thank you all for watching.